get to more phone calls coming up. He's Peter King, the great columnist, Football Morning in America, and contributor to Football Night in America. All right, Pete, let me start with the news here. Ian Rappaport saying Bill Belichick's got a second interview with the Atlanta Falcons. Do you think this is maybe a foregone conclusion? That's the best place for Belichick?
I don't know, Dan. I mean, you tell me. You tell me now whether, if you were Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman right now, you tell me, who do you want to coach your team next year? I mean, I understand that it's crazy to fire a coach 11 and a half months after he had his team in the Super Bowl. I get it. But you saw what happened to the Eagles. You listened to Jalen Hurts after the game, in which he gave probably the most lukewarm milquetoast endorsement of a coach that you could possibly give. And you tell me there's not some issues there. That plus the fact that Jalen Hurts played just laconic football at the end of the year. I don't know what to call it. I can't figure it out, but that word comes to mind. I guess if Atlanta is going to sprint out and go out there and really try to seal up Bill Belichick, I suppose they'll get him. But Seth Wickersham had a great post on social media, I think it was yesterday, where he said, remember how all these teams didn't go after Tom Brady when he was a free agent, and some of them really regret it? Dan, I'm telling you, to this day, I believe the 49ers sincerely regret it. So I don't know what to say other than you can find all the ways to criticize Belichick the way you can find ways to criticize Tom Brady, 4 years ago. But, I mean, it's Tom Brady. It's Bill Belichick. So I don't know. I do think some teams are going to have regrets if the Falcons swoop in and sign him.
The Cowboys decide to keep Mike McCarthy with Bill Belichick out there. How surprising is that to upgrade your coaching position?
Look, if you've won 36 regular season games in 3 years, I think you have a great argument to stay regardless of what happens in the postseason. But, Dan, look at 3 years in a row how their season has ended. It crashed and burned in Dallas against the 49ers 2 years ago when Dak and McCarthy screwed up the clock at the end of the game. It crashed and burned in an ugly loss at San Francisco, which they couldn't do anything on offense. And then, look at what happened in San Francisco this year. They lose 42-10. So you win 12 games, but does anybody really feel at the end of this season, however you feel about how they were just absolutely manhandled by the 7th seed in the NFC, whatever you feel, does anybody feel they're close to the 49ers? I don't. So I don't know. To me, I thought Jerry Jones was going to look at this and say, we need shock therapy. We're a good team, but we're not going to win with this current administration. But Jerry decided otherwise.
Yeah, trying to figure that out. The 12 wins is great, and they could have 12 wins next year. But it doesn't mean anything unless you do something in the postseason. You could win 9 games and go to the Super Bowl. But, hey, we got 12 wins. Okay, how dangerous are you when you get to the postseason? And you lose at home, and you lose to one of the youngest teams that we've had in recent history, and a quarterback making his postseason debut. And you were never in that game. I mean,
crazy thing is, Dan, to me, when I think about that game, I just think that had to be one of the most embarrassing games that Dan Quinn has ever run a defense for. And, you look at the end of this season, I think the last, 8 or 9 games, I figured it out the other day, they've allowed 25 points a game and 353 yards.
Yeah.
This is not, it was a shocking development, no question, but that Cowboys defense has looked like the Eagles defense over the last 6 or 7 weeks. And I don't know what that means really. I just know that, just the same way I was shocked that Jonathan Gannon got the job in Arizona last year, coming off a game in which his defense gave up two of the softest touchdowns in Super Bowl history. To lose the Super Bowl, and then 3 days later, he's being introduced as the coach of the Cardinals. And again, look, Jonathan Gannon's a good coach. Don't get me wrong. So maybe it shouldn't matter. Dan Quinn's a good coach. Maybe it shouldn't matter. I can't figure out how you pull an absolute no-show in that game, and that's what the Dallas defense did.
Talking to Peter King. I don't know other candidates who have been reported with Seattle other than Dan Quinn. Who else is in play for the Seattle Seahawks?
That's a really good question. They've kept it very close to the vest. I think they're in no hurry. I think they're doing this the right way, quite honestly. John Schneider, he's not going to be forced into doing anything. I think the best guy for that job, without any question, is Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel will be perfect with a guy like John Schneider because John Schneider is a really good personnel guy. He'll find a quarterback for Mike Vrabel. All Mike Vrabel has to do is go and replicate the Legion of Boom. And I'm exaggerating there, but Mike Vrabel is a really, really good defensive coach, can build a good defense. And even when there's nothing to play for, look what happened against Jacksonville. They played that game like it was the 7th game of the World Series. That's what you want in your head coach. That's what was lacking to me with Nick Sirianni over the last 6 weeks.
We had Albert Breer on last hour, and he said that he feels like the Chargers' job is Jim Harbaugh's, if he wants it. What do you think?
I think it is too. The Chargers have to do it, Dan. There's no question about it. They don't have a choice. They have just gone from, hiring an inexperienced head coach in Brandon Staley, and it didn't work. And now they're in some trouble with a quarterback who's a franchise quarterback, and all you ever do is go 500 there on average. I think the fire alarm is going off in their building, and they need help. And I do think that Harbaugh is going to be the guy, just assuming that they can get the contract done.
The Washington job with the number 2 pick overall, it feels like that's a really good opportunity to step into, but you would know better than I would of are they going to get an established coach, a former coach?
I think it's more likely they get an offensive brain. I think when I sort of project all of these jobs, the one person for that job who I think would be ideal is Ben Johnson from Detroit. You see what he's done with Jared Goff. He's done a fantastic job with Goff. Goff was so tremendous the other night. I was in the building, and I'll just tell you this. There was a tenseness at the start of that game. There was that place. I wrote it in my column. At one point, they have one of those decibel meters, and the decibel meter was at 118. I mean, that's louder than Seattle, or maybe just as loud. Now, it's a dome, but that is the same noise that you hear if you were standing, which we would never do, if you're standing on the runway and a 737 is taking off and you're right there as it passes by. That's what the noise was. And it never stopped. Dan Quinn told me 75 minutes before the game, the hair on the back of his neck is standing up because he's never been in an environment like that at that point before the game. But I think Ben Johnson would be a really good candidate. They're going to take a quarterback number 2, almost certainly. So let Ben Johnson work with, one of those guys, Drake May, Penix, Caleb Williams, whatever happens. And that's what I would do if I were them.
The odds of Carolina getting an established coach.
I mean, Dan, who wants to coach in Carolina? Let's be honest. I mean, who wants to go to work for David Tepper? Tell me. I would like to know. There's a lot of people who would say, "Oh, I'll take that job," and look, they'll get somebody good. I mean, if I were them, I'd go hard after Lou Anarumo. He got jobbed last year. He is an excellent football coach. He will build a great defense and he'll figure it out on offense. But I think Lou Anarumo would be a great choice there. He'd establish some toughness right away, some credibility. But I also think that they have to be looking at somebody to salvage Bryce Young. And look, I'm so tired of hearing Bryce Young's a bust. What a terrible choice, all that stuff. How would you know if you're running for your life every snap? I mean, it's ridiculous to say that Bryce Young's a waste. It's stupid. And he still has a chance, I think, to be really good in the NFL. They just have to prioritize the offensive line above all.
The situation with the Colts with Jim Irsay, obviously sensitivity there, but the NFL, how do you handle something like that with Jim Irsay's health situation?
If indeed that it is substance abuse related, I think they have to treat this with some care. I mean, obviously they'll treat it with care, but they also have to treat it like, you can't have different rules for an owner that you have for, a coach or a player. And in my opinion, I think the NFL is going to have to find a way to massage this and to gently find a way to make sure he gets X amount of treatment and that there is probably at some point some discipline involved if it is what it appears to be. But again, I think we're so early in the story, we may end up finding out that it isn't what everybody says it is right now. So I think we have to be cautious about making any final judgment on that right now.
Good to talk to you, Pete. Safe travels this weekend. Thank you.
Hey, all the best, Dan. Good to talk to you.
That's Peter King, Football Morning in America columnist, contributor to Football Night in America.